Welcome to MYFest2024. This is the second session of the Future track, facilitated by Dani Dilkes. And then on the screen, I'm showing the community agreements, just 4 of them, and I'm gonna drop a link in the chat to them so you can contribute or view the slides that I'm showing. So you are welcome here regardless of anything: race, disability, gender, sexual orientation, background, ethnicity. Assume positive intentions, critique ideas, not people, and make space for others. And there is a link that I'm going to be dropping in the chat and a QR code so you can contribute our community agreements. We're also going to post a feedback link. So by the end of the session, you can give feedback on any session on this session, and you can always let me or Ken know. So if you need any help, like changing your name or any help throughout the session. If you feel that your access needs are not met throughout the session, also you're welcome to let me know, and then we're gonna find a workaround towards your comfort. I'm gonna hand over to Dani so she can get us started.
Okay, thank you, Yasser, and welcome everyone. I am going to share my screen. The slides have been pasted in the chat. And I'll paste them one more time because I think we had someone just join us. All right. So this is Speculative Futures for Education Part 2. If you didn't join us for Part 1, that's okay, because we're going to spend a bit of time looking at what happened in Part 1 and building on it. Part 1 was about creating future worlds, and Part 2 is about defining the people we want to be in the future. So they are two different ways of thinking about the future, and what today's session is very much looking inwards and looking at ourselves. So we are actually just going to start in order to orientate ourselves to the future with 5 minutes of free writing. So I invite you, if you are a pen and paper person, to grab a piece of paper and a pen. If you're a digital person, to open up a Word doc or a Google Doc. If you're a phone person, open up a phone app and you can talk to write. But whatever modality you choose, I'm going to give you 5 minutes to think about the following 2 prompts. So the first is, how do you feel about the future? Very much digging into that affect of what are you actually feeling? Is it giving you butterflies in your stomach? Is it creating anxiety? Is it creating hope and joy? How do you feel about the future? And what is shaping this feeling? So those are our 2 prompts. I will paste them in the chat. And our 5 minutes will start now. To start with feeling, our rough agenda, we started with feeling the future. So we've already sort of worked through some of those affects of what the future is bringing us. I'll have one quick slide just reorientating us to speculative methods for those of you who may not have joined us in the session 2 weeks ago. We'll play a quick speculative game called In a World Where. And then we're going to visit the worlds that we created in the session 2 weeks ago. So we're going to do something called tour guide training. Each of you is going to become an expert in one of these worlds. And then you're going to explain that world to a group of your peers. And then we'll end up by choosing one of those worlds, whichever one those tour guides kind of sold to you as the most interesting world for you to live in the future. And you're going to write yourself a letter from that future. So this is our rough agenda. Time will be a bit fluid as we move through it, but this is kind of what we're hoping to achieve today. So very briefly, what are speculative methods? Speculative methods are essentially a way of crafting possible futures. Speculative fiction is one form of speculative method. There are other forms of speculative methods. For example, speculative design, which is designing objects of the future. But today we're focused on speculative fiction or speculative storytelling. And the reason that we do this, the reason that we speculate, is to look at concerning possibilities. So if we can imagine futures that we might be headed towards. And if those futures are not what we want them to be, if those futures are dark or anxiety provoking or concerning, that allows us to figure out what we need to change today to make those futures less likely. It can provoke reflection on current trends. So along those same lines, what are we doing today that could make those possible and what do we need to do differently? And it can also provoke critical hope. So by imagining better futures, it empowers us to make steps today towards those futures. So broadly, these are sort of the rationales for speculative methods. At the end of the slides, and I can also share the slides from our last session, at the end of the slides is a really interesting article from Octavia Butler about how to imagine the future for people who are interested in more information. And just have to acknowledge Ty in the chat having a cat wreaking havoc behind her. I'm not at home. If I was at home, my cat would be joining your cat. So I can definitely empathize with the cat chaos. So we are going to play our first, well, our only game. I will reshare the slide. And our game is a microfiction game where I invite you to finish the sentence. And the game is called In a World Where. And so last time we played a game called What If? And in the What If game, we're imagining future worlds and what the outside world would be like under certain conditions. For today, as I mentioned before, our focus is not sort of on the out there. Our focus is on the in here. So today, in our imaginative future worlds, I want you to imagine who you would be in these worlds, how this would change how you do things, how you engage in the world, what decisions you make, whatever comes to mind. So our first prompt is in a world where a 4-day work week is the norm, I would ... And I invite you to edit, to add your responses in the slide, although somebody is telling me, thank you, Veronica. Apparently I am failing a lot on sharing slides today. So let's see if I can fix that. Share, edit. This is not the first time I've given a Google presentation, just in case folks are wondering, but let's try this again. Could somebody please attempt to edit the slides and let me know if I have now fixed the problem? Thank you. All right. So now that people should be able to edit the slides, I can quickly demo what we're going to do. There are 8 speech bubbles on the screen. I invite you to select a speech bubble to finish the short story. In a world where a 4-day work week is the norm, I would. Because these are shared slides, lots of people are editing them. If you're able to see the slide, you'll see on a speech bubble that somebody else has selected, it will be surrounded by a different color. So just choose one that's not already selected. If the Google Slides are not working for you for whatever reason, you're also welcome to finish the sentence in the Zoom chat. So the slides are one option, the Zoom chat is another option. Both options are equally wonderful ways for you to finish our story. So if you're still working on your response, please continue. I am actually noticing possibly some reflections from the feelings of the future and the responses here. which is making me make some assumptions about who has typed what, but they might be inaccurate. But I do see hope, and I do see sort of some of that anxiety, and I do see some of that cynicism. So I'm seeing lots of different feelings coming out in your responses. So we see in a world where a 4-day work week is the norm, I would work and play the same amount. I would conceive time differently and be intentional of how I use my time to pursue my hobbies. So I see that as a hopeful take on this future. I would be working 5 days. I see that as more of a cynical hope, but maybe it's somebody who currently works 7 days and is now working 5 days. So I'm going to interpret it. Hopefully whoever wrote that, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I would fight for a 3-day work week. Excellent. Let's get it down to 1 day a week. That would be awesome. I would still receive way too many emails. I added the way because I feel the same way. My inbox is untenable. And I would still facilitate a session on the 5th day. But so very interesting responses. And Ken writes, or likes the 5-day spread. Yeah, and that's true too. Maybe the 4-day work week isn't for everyone. And I did make some assumptions that people would love a 4-day work week. All right, we're going to do one more round of In a World Where. So if we move to slide 7, our next prompt is a little bit more futuristic, a little bit more speculative. In a world where teleportation is possible, inexpensive, and ecological, so I wanted to make sure that there is no question of the ethics here. I would, and again, you're welcome to choose a speech bubble and finish it, or answer in the Zoom chat. All right, if you're still working on your response, please continue. And again, you're welcome to put your response in the chat. I see some interesting responses. So in a world where teleportation is possible, inexpensive, and ecological, I would attend in-person events more often. Yes, and in faraway places. I don't know if anyone was here when there was the speculative conversation of an in-person MYFest, but there were some interesting location possibilities. But it was just a speculative exercise, so I don't believe it's happening. I would travel more, but only if I can bring my dog with me. I don't see why there would be any dog restrictions on teleportation, so let's all bring our pet. I would spend so much more time traveling for myself and visiting family and friends around the world. Amazing. I don't necessarily get the cultural reference on the next one, so I would definitely cosplay as Nightcrawler more often. I don't know who Nightcrawler is, and I'm wondering if this link answers that question. Is this a link? So if somebody would like to give us more information on who Nightcrawler is, I invite that. And I apologize that I don't know what that is. I'm assuming it's like a Marvel character or whatever the non-Marvel group is.
Yeah, it's Marvel.
Oh, okay. And tell us a bit about Nightcrawler and how that associates with teleportation, if you don't mind, Ken.
That wasn't mine, but Nightcrawler
Oh,
teleports literally. So
okay.
awesome.
Okay. Thank you. I would compete in so many more dragon boat festivals and possibly teleport my animals somewhere cooler so they weren't insane in my house right now. So I think it's someone where there's a great deal of heat happening. But dragon boat festival is very cool. I've never boated myself, but I've been to one. And I would hold my session or meetings in my son's kitchen. Very interesting, like very specific. If you want to expand on that, I will invite that as well. So I'll pause to see if anyone wants to give us some more context for their responses, but really interesting things that people choose to focus on for teleportation. Does anyone want to share more?
This is Ty. I will say that it was hard to just pick like something that would fit within the space of the bubble. So that was part of what shaped my response was the space available to create said response. Because I was like, ooh, and this, and this, and this. So yeah.
If I didn't say it when I introduced the activity, I meant to. It was a micro storytelling or whatever the like shortest micro storytelling prefix is. But yes, it was meant to be very, very short. So it's interesting how that changes speculation. Maybe we'll do a different philosophical look at speculation in a future session. The sun unavailable for comments. I yeah, I don't know what the meetings in your son's kitchen is all about, but it sounds intriguing. All right, let's move forward to our world. So for those of you who weren't with us 2 weeks ago, I just want to quickly talk about what we did. And I will dig out the slides and share them, but they're not necessary for today's session, so I'll share them at the end. But essentially, we brainstormed the significant factors, the significant kind of elements in the world that will shape education. And then we voted to generate a top 8. So the top 8 things that we wanted to sort of use to characterize these worlds to see what education would be like in the future. And using those characteristics, we brainstormed 3 different versions of the future. So there was a dystopian future, which is sort of the worst possible future, a utopian future, which is the best possible future, and then a plausible future, which is sort of mixed elements of both. And each group got together, they sort of figured out how to define each of those 8 characteristics for this future. Some of the groups didn't quite finish. So following the workshop, I did fill in some of the gaps to complete the worlds. And those worlds are what we're going to be looking at today. And so I will talk about tour guide training in a second, but I just want to talk about the characteristics. So I'm just going to move to slide 12 quickly. You don't need to join me there. But the 8 things that we collectively decided were important characteristics for understanding the future, and particularly education in the future, were: how will generative AI impact students' critical thinking and their creativity with AI? Who will we make quality education and training be accessible to? Who will define what knowledge and skills development will be prioritized in universities? How will the role of educators change with AI? How will climate emergencies impact access to education? How will student success be defined? How will student skill, confidence, and tenacity change as a function of generative AI or large language models? And with the use of AI, how could students apply ethics in their work? So within the slides, you'll see 3 different worlds that have been defined around these 8 framing questions. And so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into breakout rooms. and complete tour guide training. So I am going to randomly generate breakout rooms, and you'll be placed in a breakout room. It's either the dystopian tour guide group, the utopian tour guide group, or the plausible future tour guide group. And in your group, you'll go through the slides for your world, whichever world you've been assigned, and you'll come up with sort of a quick presentation with the defining characteristics of that world. So you can write summary notes, you can compile some images, whatever you think would make an intriguing presentation, tour guide presentation on that world. Following this activity, you'll be remixed into groups where a tour guide from each of the 3 worlds will be together, and you'll present your world to your peers. The purpose of this is to make sure everyone is orientated to all 3 of the worlds. So then you can choose which world you want to write your future letter from. So in the Google Slides, the worlds are on slide, the dystopian world is on slides 11 through 14. And your tour guide slide, the slide that you'll be editing, is slide 13. And I'll paste this in the chat as well. The utopian future worlds are on slides 15 to 18. And your tour guide slide is slide 17. And then the plausible future are slides 19 through 22. And your tour guide slide is slide 21. For your tour guide slide, you can put the notes and the images and the media on the slide however you as a group decide. So there is no further directions than put some notes and put some media there in order to present it. Are there any questions before I put you into breakout rooms?
You might need to come round just to check if we are doing okay.
I will pop through and snoop on everyone
Okay.
as we go through.
Okay.
All right. Just bear with me a moment for the breakout room because I do need to figure out 3 participants per room. Dystopian. Utopian. Well, so your breakout room will be named as either dystopian, utopian, or plausible. And it looks like we'll have 2 folks per room. All right, and you'll have about 15 minutes in your room. I will pop around and check in case people need more time. But have fun traveling to your future worlds. Yep. All right, welcome back, everyone. I was sort of snooping in your slides. It looks like you pulled together some really interesting tour guides to your future. As I mentioned, there is a scheduled break, so we are going to take a 5-minute break. For those of you who are still in your slides and editing, I can see that. You can continue on if you choose to. But we will, for me, it's currently 1:49. I'm not sure what time it is for everyone else, but we'll reconnect in 5 minutes. So for me, that would be 1:54. When we come back, I'm going to mix up the groups. So then there will be a group with a tour guide from dystopia, from utopia, and from the plausible future in each group. And you'll have a bit of time to sort of pitch your world. I realize that the challenge is you're not trying to pitch the world that is the best world to live in because the worlds have already been defined that way. You're trying to pitch the world that's the most interesting world to speculate about who you would be in that future. So for some of you, it might be the utopian world, but that might be the easiest place to be yourself. So you might then choose to imagine yourself in the dystopian future and see where are the boundaries of your identity in that future. So just a pitch that you're not planning a vacation. You're trying to imagine the world and who you would be in that world. So something to think about. I stole a minute of your break, but I will see you back in 4.5 minutes. If you want to take the full 5 minutes, Ken, please do.
Oh, no, it's fine. I just thought someone might show up now. I'm wondering what's going on. They might be able to read the chat.
I took my break when you guys are in your breakout room, so I'll be here. Okay, that was 5-ish minutes. If you haven't rejoined us yet, or you need another minute, I will try and speak slowly, but I'm going to reshare my screen. And so now what we're going to do is I've remixed the breakout rooms. Hopefully I did it properly. So each breakout room, there will now be 2 instead of 3, and each breakout room should have 3 people, 1 tour guide from each of those worlds. Each tour guide in your room will have about 4 minutes, I'll say 3 to 4 minutes, to share your world with your peers. So you can share your screen, or you can just direct people to that slide in the slide deck. Again, you're not trying to pitch your world as an ideal vacation spot, because that's not going to work for some of the worlds, but you're just trying to intrigue people as to imagining what that world would be like. The purpose of doing this is as you learn about the 3 different worlds, you want to decide where you want to go for the rest of the workshop. And as a reminder, the next part of the workshop after this, essentially, you're going to imagine who you would be in this world, and you'll write yourself a letter from the future. So for some of you, you might want to imagine yourself in the utopian world. For some of you, you might want to imagine yourself in the dystopian world. And for some of you, because it's the most plausible, you might want to imagine yourself in the most plausible world. That really depends on what you're trying to get out of the workshop. But it's an exercise in sort of defining our identities in these unknown futures. I will ask once you get into your rooms, just figure out how you'll keep time in the room, just so you do keep to time, because I will bring you back in exactly 12 minutes from when you get into the breakout rooms. Are there any questions before I open up the new breakout room? Seeing no questions, lots of excited tour guides ready to pitch their worlds. So I will open up your room and you'll have 12 minutes. Traveling. So hopefully, as hopefully with all of your tour guides, you now have a good sense of all three of the future worlds. So we're going to move into our last activity, which is returning to some writing. And so our slide here says you have arrived. Hopefully in your session, you were able to decide which of the worlds you wanted to imagine yourself in. And again, it's not the world you want to live in necessarily, because there is value in sort of the speculation of uncertain futures, the speculation of negative futures, or the speculation of positive futures. So you could choose one of the three worlds. And you could either return to the piece of paper you had used at the beginning for the free writing, or the Word document, or your phone, or have a brand new piece of paper document or audio recording. And you're going to imagine who you are in the future you have chosen. So this is our final activity. And the question is, who will you be? Octavia Butler, in her Guide to Predicting the Future, writes, in thinking about how we design the futures that we want and how to solve the problems, she writes, there's no single answer that will solve all of our future problems. There's no magic bullet. Instead, there are thousands of answers, at least. You can be one of them if you choose to be. So I'm going to invite everyone to spend the next 10 minutes, and you can turn off your webcams, stay muted for the next 10 minutes to write yourself a letter from the future. And I've provided some prompts, but you can kind of frame it however you want. But I want you to think about, who are you in this future? What do you do? What do you value? What challenges are you encountering? What gives you hope or joy? And possibly you might want to think about all these things by situating yourself very specifically in that future and describing a day in your life that was meaningful or impactful. So 10 minutes isn't a lot of time. I don't expect you to do all the things. And when you come back, I'm not going to ask you to share your letter. The letter is for you, but just possibly come back. We'll have an opportunity to share back on the process of writing the letter. So I will type these questions into the chat, and then we will give everyone 10 minutes to write yourself a letter. And for those of you, I think a couple people aren't able to stay to the end. So if you're not able to stay to the end, thank you for sticking it out with us. And I hope you're able to imagine some of that critical hope that we talked about at the beginning. But for everyone else, you have 10 minutes. As I mentioned, the letters are for you.
Sorry.
It's okay. I invite. Yeah, we can all record all the things. That's
Yeah.
fine. Well, except I'm going to invite you guys to share back, so maybe you don't want it recorded.
Exactly.
But the questions for the share back are not what did you write, but how did the writing process, like how was the writing process for you? So did your future self surprise you? What did you find challenging about imagining yourself in this future? And what did you find reassuring about imagining yourself in this future? So would anyone like to share? And you can choose to share which future you selected or not. You can talk in abstracts or specifics, but would anyone like to share? And if you'd prefer to share in the chat, please do.
I can share.
I stopped recording for, yeah.
Thank you,
Well,
Dani.
yeah, wasn't that cool? I think it's really was a great session, and thank you so much. I'm still resharing the feedback link.
Oh, thank you.
Those who can give us feedback, I really appreciate that. And thank you, Dani. I'm looking forward to many more sessions with you and the other presenters or the other facilitators who are here. And thank you, David, for being in my group as we looked at that world that we are so running away from. So thank you, everyone. Have a good day, good afternoon, and good evening. So I can stop the recording.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.